Have you ever noticed your pet doing something strange? Something you just can't explain? For me, it was my golden retriever Briggs. A big, goofy, sunshine-loving dog who, for some reason, would sit by the window every single time it rained. Not just for a minute or two. He would stay there for hours, nose almost pressed against the glass, just staring out into the downpour. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe he was just fascinated by the raindrops. Or perhaps he was bummed that he couldn't go out to play. But as the seasons changed and the storms rolled in, his ritual never wavered. He'd leave his favorite toy, abandon a half-eaten bowl of food, and take up his post. There was this profound sadness in his eyes, a look I'd never seen on him otherwise. It was a quiet, deep sorrow that a simple belly rub couldn't fix. I tried everything to distract him. I'd toss his favorite squeaky tennis ball. I'd offer him the tastiest treats. I even tried sitting with him, hoping my presence would offer some comfort. But he was in his own world, lost in whatever he was seeing or not seeing out that window. It started to genuinely worry me. What was going on inside that furry head of his? What was he waiting for? The answer, as it turns out, was more heartbreaking and beautiful than I could have ever imagined. It all started when I decided to dig into his past. I adopted Briggs from a local shelter about a year ago. He was found as a stray, so his history was a blank page. The shelter staff told me he was sweet, a bit timid, but otherwise a healthy, happy dog. They didn't have much else to share. Driven by this rainy day mystery, I started reaching out. I posted Briggs's photo on local community forums and social media groups. I described his strange behavior, asking if anyone recognized him or knew anything about his life before he came to me. For weeks, I got nothing but kind words and well wishes. I was starting to lose hope, thinking this was just one of Briggs's unexplainable quirks. Then, one rainy Tuesday afternoon, I received an email. It was from an elderly woman named Clara. The subject line simply read, "Is this Leo?" The email contained a picture. It was a slightly younger, scruffier version of Briggs, sitting next to an old man on a park bench. They both had the biggest smiles on their faces. My heart pounded as I read her message. She explained that the dog in the photo was named Leo, and he had belonged to her husband, Frank. Frank was a retired mailman who had adored his dog more than anything. They were inseparable. Every single day, no matter the weather, Frank and Leo would walk their route together. Frank would deliver the mail, and Leo would trot happily by his side, greeting everyone along the way. But their favorite part of the day was after the route was done. They would go to the park, and Frank would sit on his favorite bench while Leo chased squirrels. Clara wrote that Frank used to say, "Leo isn't just my dog, he's my co-pilot." Then tragedy struck. One stormy afternoon, Frank suffered a massive heart attack while they were out on their walk. An ambulance came, but it was too late. In the chaos and the pouring rain, a frightened and confused Leo ran off. Clara and her family searched for him for weeks, putting up flyers and visiting shelters, but he was gone. They were devastated, not just by the loss of Frank, but by the disappearance of his beloved companion. As I read her words, I looked over at Briggs and Leo. He was at his usual post by the window, watching the rain fall. And suddenly, it all made sense. The sadness in his eyes, the patient waiting. He wasn't just watching the rain. He was waiting for Frank. He was waiting for his best friend to come home, just like he always did after a storm. The rain wasn't a source of fear or fascination. It was a memory. It was the last thing he experienced with the person he loved most in the world. My eyes filled with tears. This whole time, my goofy, happy dog had been carrying this immense grief, this deep-seated hope. He was reliving the moment he lost his world, hoping for a different outcome every time the sky turned gray. I immediately replied to Clara, confirming that this was indeed her Leo. We arranged for her to visit the very next day. I was a nervous wreck. What if he didn't remember her? What if seeing her just brought back more pain? The next day was fittingly overcast. As Clara's car pulled into the driveway, Briggs was already at the window, but this time his posture was different. He wasn't just staring blankly. His tail gave a slight, hesitant wag. When I opened the door, Clara stood there, her eyes immediately welling up. "Leo?" she whispered. At the sound of his old name, Briggs froze. He turned his head, his ears perked up. He slowly walked towards her, sniffing cautiously. He looked from her face to my face and back again. Then something clicked. His tail started wagging frantically. He let out a soft whine, a sound of pure, unadulterated recognition. He nudged his head into her hand and then practically leaped into her arms, showering her with licks. It was a reunion a year in the making. Clara cried, and I'm not ashamed to say, I cried right along with her. She spent the rest of the afternoon with us, sharing stories about Frank and Leo. She brought his old, worn-out leash and his favorite stuffed bear. Briggs or Leo didn't leave her side for a second. It was like a missing piece of his soul had finally been returned. Making the decision that followed was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. I loved this dog with all my heart. He was my companion, my furry best friend. But seeing him with Clara, seeing that profound, deep-seated sadness finally lift from his eyes, I knew what I had to do. He didn't just belong with me. He belonged with his family. He belonged with the memory of Frank. Clara was overjoyed, but also insisted that I remain a part of his life. So we made a deal. Leo would go live with Clara, but I would have unlimited visitation rights. I became his official godparent and weekend adventure buddy. Now, Leo lives with Clara, sleeping in his old bed, surrounded by the familiar sense of his first home. I visit them every weekend, and we go on long hikes and trips to the dog park. He's a completely different dog. He's still my goofy, wonderful Briggs, but he's also the confident, cherished Leo. The deep sadness is gone, replaced by a calm, quiet joy. And you know what? He still sometimes sits by the window when it rains. But it's different now. He's not waiting anxiously anymore. Clara says he just sits there for a few minutes, looks out, and then comes and lays his head in her lap. It's as if he's no longer waiting for Frank to come home, but simply remembering him with love. He found his closure. And in a way, so did I. This incredible dog taught me that love and loyalty have no expiration date. And that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to help them find their way back home. Thanks for listening to our story. If you have a pet, give them an extra hug today. You never know the stories they carry in their hearts. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this one. See you next time.